Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Costanzo review. And this evening, we're going to be reviewing a Korean drama that we just watched. It's called My Perfect Stranger, and it came out in 2023. And it was really, really good. We enjoyed it. What were your initial thoughts?
Okay, so we just finished this one a couple days ago, and I was surprised by how good it was. It's a time travel story. It's really kind of like taking the concept of Back to the Future and developing it more and hashing it out and adding its own thing. You know, they took that kind of raw concept, but they added a lot of their own ideas in it, and it's like Back to the Future and a murder mystery at the same time, which is kind of crazy, but it's a really cool idea, and they did a really good job with it. When I first started it, I would say the first 2 episodes, I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. You know, I wasn't like hooked immediately from the first 2 episodes, but by episode 3, I was hooked on it, and it was like almost like a virtual page turner, where at the end of each episode, you're ready to see the next one. Like, oh, I just got to see one more episode. So, yeah. How about you?
Initial thoughts? Well, I want to take credit because I was the one who picked out this Korean drama. We were kind of scrolling through, and what we do is sometimes we kind of look online to see what drama we're going to watch next. So we take, certain people's advice online, and so we chose this one, and right off the bat, it had me intrigued. The soundtrack, the plot line of time travel, I always thought that was very interesting. And I would agree with you, the first couple of episodes kind of were a little bit slow. They were just kind of laying out the groundwork. But after the second episode, it really started to pick up. And I really, really enjoyed it. Time travel to me, sometimes it can be difficult and sometimes it can be confusing. I think My Perfect Stranger kind of had a good balance and a deft hand in terms of sequence and going back in time, and yet not being completely unreasonable about things that were taking place.
Yeah, it was like one of the few time travel style stories I've seen that wasn't like completely confusing.
Yeah.
And as far as much as they could, I feel like they were as consistent as you can be with the concept of time travel, which the concept of time travel is completely illogical and doesn't fit in with the way that God created
the universe.
So you obviously have to suspend your belief, and there's going to be things that are just like, okay, wait, that doesn't make sense. That's circular or whatever. But that's just that's the way things are going to be when you're dealing with time travel. But as far as it goes, I thought they did a really good job with it. Yeah,
and it's not just a time traveling movie. It's very similar to Back to the Future in that way, where they go back in time, and she obviously meets her parents, which is very similar to Back to the Future. But there's romance. There's also it's a murder mystery. So they're trying to figure out a murder that happened in 1987. So obviously the year's 2021. So they go back to 1987 and try to figure out who this serial murderer was and how that impacts their past and their future.
Yeah.
And so I thought that there's a lot of things that happen, in that time period. And I think they did a good job of just, obviously showing us what South Korea looked like in 1987, but in how these murders actually impacted both of these people's lives and their families.
Yeah. So just to give a quick overview of the setup of it, this is one of those that you really don't want to get into spoilers because it completely hinges on not knowing what's going to happen, as most mysteries do. But it starts out with, you have this guy in 2021 who finds a car. Sound familiar?
Yes.
And the car takes him to the future, and he figures out some things about his future. I'm not going to tell you right now what that is. But because of what he finds out in the future, he decides to go back in the past, and he wants to apprehend a serial killer from the past. And this serial killer started his killings in 1987, so he's going back to 1987. Well, he goes back to 1987, but in the process, there's another another character who comes along with him. and you start to realize that they're there for a reason. They both kind of have separate purposes, but their purposes, they discover that their purposes are related in trying to find out who this murderer is and trying to apprehend him. And it's all in order to save their futures. So there's a lot at stake, which makes it very interesting.
Yeah.
What would you say are some pros?
Some pros.
Yeah.
Okay, some pros. First pro, the soundtrack was fantastic. I thought throughout the whole series, just different tracks that brought you into the scene. They just did a good job. It's a varied soundtrack, but the soundtrack was really good. I would also say
like 80s style songs too, kind
80s,
of like little 80s flair, which was cool.
Yeah, 80s style songs. Some really, really good tracks. And I would say the cinematography, I thought it was shot really well. It's a beautiful movie. Obviously, they're shooting back in 1987, but some really good shots, and it's just kind of very pleasing to the eye to watch. I would also say the two lead actors did a really good job, especially the female lead. Forgot her name, but she did a fantastic job, and she was very real. She was kind of Jin Ki-ju, but she was the emotional force behind them. She did a really good job. I think that everything kind of centered around her and her family, and just kind of really brought you in. So, do you have some pros that you want to talk about?
Yeah. The main female lead was probably the highlight, like Grant already said. She was just really interesting, just adorable, like her facial expressions and everything. Very emotionally, like an emotional actress. You saw a lot of different emotions in her, and I think whenever an actress shows a lot of emotion in the right way, it draws you in more because you get a little window into what's going on with them. Sometimes if the actor is wooden, it's harder to feel for them or to feel with them, and I feel like for her, she was very emotionally available actress, which was one of the first things that I liked about it. That's like what kind of hooked me onto it, was her initially. I think that the thing that makes this drama so good is that even though it's we're talking about different technical things like going back in time and solving a murder, it is very heartfelt. Like, it tugs at your heartstrings, because it gets into these characters' lives and you care a lot about the characters, and it's one of those kind of movies that has multiple genres going on. Kind of like what Grant said earlier. It's a romance. It's got a lot of heartfelt moments, but then it also has dark and scary moments, because you've got a murderer. You've got like intense. There were moments where I felt very, very like scared, intense moments. There were moments where I felt very emotional, like I was gonna cry. It's like a wide range, and I didn't expect that at first. When we first started it, I was like, okay, this is gonna be an interesting murder mystery. I didn't expect how heartfelt it would be and how much I would be pulled into it.
I think one of the cool things about the series was that the way they shot it, and they bring these scenes in with both these people that have traveled back in time, and they meet people that they know, obviously close relatives of theirs, their family, but you put yourself in that position. You put yourself in their shoes of what it would be like to meet your parents when they were young. And I thought that was crazy. It's just a crazy cool kind of concept. And what would you tell them, and you gain a better appreciation for who they are when you see the things that they go through, when you see their context of their family life and everything like that. So like you said before, it was very heartfelt, and you can kind of relate to the characters, and they did a good job of making you care about these characters. And so I would say that all those things were pros.
So what were some cons for you?
I would say one of the cons was that it wasn't so big budget in terms of production. There were a few locations that they shot. They were shooting at a school, they were shooting at a house. There wasn't like these sweeping, huge, like beautiful shots taking place. So I would say a little smaller on the budget side. There wasn't like a whole host of characters. Obviously it's your preference, but I usually like big budget you know, huge sweeping shots and, you know, grand locations. It's just
Yeah.
not this kind of drama. But, you know, they still made it work. What about
Yeah.
you? What would you say were some of your comments?
So one thing that kind of bugged me a little bit, it wasn't like a huge deal, but the main lead, so the main male lead, he was a little bit wooden to me, I thought, especially in contrast to the girl who, like I said before, was very emotionally available. That being said, I really liked him as a character. I really
Yeah.
did. I mean, he was a great character. There's so much to like about his character, and I liked the actor too. He was very likable. I just felt like in certain scenes, and we can get into this more in the spoiler review, but in certain scenes where it felt like, okay, this scene merits a lot of emotion. Like if he's, you know, if he's a real person, like he's gonna be feeling this, and he would just kind of give just very kind of deadpan reactions, and I just felt like the moment could have been so much better if he had shown more emotion, because it would have drawn the audience in more
Yeah.
to what was happening, because you already felt for him, you already liked him as a character, so now you're like, oh, you know, this is happening, but his reactions kind of like, I don't know, it just
Yeah.
sometimes they were a little bit lacking.
Yeah, he does a good job of keeping the story going, and you're rooting for him because he's a good moral character. He's, you know, he's a righteous guy. But yeah, there's just certain scenes where it kind of calls for more emotion to draw you in. Still did a good job.
Still a great character. Love
Yeah.
the character. Yeah, my other con would be just that there are some dark moments in the show, and it's kind of weird because it can be so heartfelt, but there can be some dark moments as well, and some of it is pretty dark. And there was at least one moment where I was like, okay, I just want to fast forward this. Like I really don't want to watch this. It's interesting because of the contrast, because there's these light, heartfelt moments and sweet moments and all of this, but there's also some really dark moments, which may not be a problem for a lot of people, but just for some people it might. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, you know, those scenes are kind of few and far between, but there are a couple that are a little bit dark.
Yeah. And as I've seen the whole drama now, I can see where those dark scenes pushed the emotion later on. Whereas at the time I didn't understand that. I'm like, oh wow. I felt the emotion of what happens later much more because of how dark that, you know, period of the show was.
Yeah.
So it does have a purpose. Like it drives the emotion of it, I think.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so what do we got next? We have Christian perspective. Is that right?
Yeah, so just little things, you know,
Yeah.
to talk about from a Christian perspective. We can't get into details since this isn't the spoiler review.
See, now this is hard because, you know, it's a murder mystery, and there's certain things that I want to say, but I can't say because then I'll spoil it for you. One of the things that I thought, kind of viewing it through the lens of Scripture, is that there are characters in this drama that do some horrible things, that commit some horrible crimes, and obviously transgress against God's law. These people were kind of born into messed up families, born into dysfunctional situations, dysfunctional families situations. But this movie, what I do enjoy about that, and made this point, is that it doesn't really matter what your circumstances are. Okay, there's no excuse for evil.
Yeah, they made that very clear in the show, which I
Yeah.
thought was really good, because a lot of
did.
shows like try to give excuses, like, oh, well, they had a bad childhood, so you know
Yeah.
you should feel bad for them. Which there was that, like there was the pity there, because
Yeah.
you do feel bad for them,
Right.
Like that is legitimate.
Yeah.
But they also showed that no matter like what's happened to you, it doesn't negate the fact that like the evil things that you do are evil and they're not
Yeah.
right, you know. And I thought that was good.
Yeah, I thought that they painted that perfectly. They didn't make them just like these martyrs or
Victims.
victims. No, there's no excuse for that. And obviously Scripture tells us that there is no excuse for evil, you know, and that we have to trust God even in our, you know, difficult circumstances. Now, you know, I'm saying this, and it's
Yeah, it's like it's a balance, and I think the show was balanced because the show did have like compassion
Yes.
on people, but it also was very clear that it doesn't excuse the behavior that you're engaging in.
What would you say?
So one thing that like stuck out to me was I thought about a lot while watching it was the sovereignty of God. And the sovereignty of God, the idea that that everything that happens is under God's control. So there's nothing outside of his control. And if you believe that God is powerful, you have to believe that he is in control of everything. And this show kind of showed that, in that, you know, when they go back in time, it's like they would change, little tiny details would change. You know, little things that maybe didn't seem that significant.
Yeah.
But because those details changed, the future was completely different.
Yeah.
And it just made me think, obviously we can't go back in time. That's not a reality, and we can't change things. Everything that happens is within the scope of, like, the providence of God.
Yeah.
But it did make me think about how we have to trust God in everything that happens in our life, even the little things, and even things that maybe don't seem like good things. You know, Grant's been preaching about Joseph. Just started a series on Joseph, and I love how, you know, all these bad things happened to Joseph, but God meant it for good. And in the end, if one little thing had changed, like, say, his brothers didn't sell him into slavery, you know, all of his people would have died in the famine. So yeah.
Good points. Good points.
And we'll get into more details on all of that in the spoiler review.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what would you say is your overall rating? We're just going to give you an overall rating, so you just have an idea of our opinion or feel of the movie. So out of 10, what would you give it?
Out of 10. So hard to rate these, you know. I would give it an 8 out of 10.
Nice.
I'm giving it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
It was one of the better Korean dramas that I've watched and
Solid.
I've seen so far, and you know how they, you know, the way, like I said, time travel and movies and shows that deal with going back in time, I mean 75-80% of them are botched, and they're just not believable, and you know they have to do certain things, and there's major plot holes. They just did a great job of, you know, being consistent throughout the whole story. You know, the murder mystery kept you guessing throughout the whole series. It was suspenseful. It was heartwarming. The acting was really good in it. You know, the characters I love. The writing was really well done. I mean, what's not to like? Obviously, there's a couple of cons here and there, you know, but I'd give it overall an 8 out of 10. I would definitely say that it has a high replayability. I would definitely go and watch this again at some time, and you know, and see certain things that I missed throughout, and it was really good. I enjoyed it. What would you say?
This is hard. I think I would say 7.5 out of 10.
Oh, okay.
And I think I would just say that because as much as I loved it, I don't think, like, time travel is not my favorite type of drama or type of story. But I mean, I thought it was really great. And I think the male lead being really wooden was a little bit hard too.
Yeah.
You know, like, because he was really kind of one of the main characters. But it was like, it was surprisingly good, but I wouldn't, like, put it up there with some of my very, very favorites. But it would definitely be like an honorable mention type of show, I think. Okay. So I'm going to give it a 7.5.
Would you watch it again?
I would watch it again with someone who hadn't seen it. That would be fun, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you already know.
You know, but you're like, oh, you know, you're like experiencing it with them. I don't think I would watch it by myself because I already know everything that's going to happen, but I wouldn't. It would be fun to watch with someone who hasn't seen it.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, that's it for our pre-spoiler video, or our review of My Perfect Stranger 2023. It's streaming now on Kakao. Yeah. And so, we highly recommend that you go and check it out and check us out. Please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button, and thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, and come and join us again as we get into the spoilers and the details and discuss them.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Later.